Well, welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis, and I'm your host. Each month, we take a look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. This month, we're going to be talking with Superintendent Greg Upham. Greg, thanks for coming with us, and let's talk some school reopening. Let's talk some levy, and let's talk the I'm sure rather slow summer that you had this summer, trying to work through all of this stuff.
Yeah,
Um, Go ahead.
no, yeah, all the above, shoots for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So walk us through a little bit. How did you kind of spend your summer? What were some of the key points over the course of the summer as you got ready for this fall when you knew you'd have be well, you probably didn't have really any idea for sure what was going to happen this fall. So walk us through some of the high points, some of the decision points, some of those things over the course of the summer.
Yeah, probably, the early stages of the summer, we had postponed the elementary levy with an official election date of July 7th. So as soon as we pretty much wrapped up the school year or close to it, or even before that, we started aggressively on the levy campaign trail, and communicating with the community and with our schools. And that was a challenge just because you can't do it live, and you couldn't do it live at that point in time. Everyone was shelter in place. So we did an enormous amount of Zoom meetings, and frankly, I thought they went very well. I just compliment Kinetic Marketing. I've partnered with them through our work and through a lot of our community type communications with the levies, and they've been outstanding and supportive of the social media piece. And so so that, we had an intense focus on that, but at the same time running parallel planning with the COVID response and what was that going to look like. Well, I'd said early on, Shoots, that we had planned on going back to school August 24th. We were watching the case counts with the active viruses through Yellowstone County, and we actually had offered some summer school programming. We offered summer school to high school students, live instruction. We housed it at the Lincoln Center, where it's always hosted here. We were able to serve 246 high school students that gained credit recovery and credit toward graduation and toward just completion of their courses. I felt really good about that. We made the decision in early June based on the case counts. I felt really at that point in time that we were probably as low as we were ever going to be, because everyone was still shelter in place and slowly coming out. The case counts were single digits at that point in time. And so we started that early June and finished it at the end of July. There were two separate groups that went into that. Brenda Koch, one of our executive directors who oversees our East cohort of schools, basically an assistant superintendent, just did a phenomenal job of putting the procedures and protocols in place. We temperature checked, we physically distanced the students, we required masking. The teachers wore masks. And I was interested in doing this as a superintendent because I needed to see a little bit of a field study, if you will, walking into this fall. So we not only offered summer school for high school students, we also offered summer school reading program at Newman Elementary School. I'll show you the picture of the students. They sent me a thank you card, and we offer a summer reading program for first and second graders that's privately funded. And it was a retired counselor from our district, and she's just been outstanding and pays for this herself. And so here are the students. You see them all in face shields. So we temperature checked and face shielded them, because in teaching reading and phonics, students have to see the teacher enunciate the letters, and the teacher has to see the students too. And then we also offered a summer Native American program. These are all in person, again, temperature checked, face coverings, physically distanced. And then we also offered a middle school summer program at Riverside Middle School, and we also offered a Kinder Jumpstart program in three of our Southside elementary schools with live instruction. So we really were able to really get a lot of flavor of what the fall would look like. We served quite a few students, and we took the safety precautions, and so far it's worked out.
Good deal. So during the course of that time, were you also working through some other scenarios as far as, okay, we're test driving this. If this doesn't go well, here are some of the other things that we work through. And what were some of those things that you guys looked at and kind of worked your way through that maybe you didn't choose to go down that road, and why didn't you choose to go down that road?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shoots. So you almost have to follow the case count to follow this story. So, when we were placed into shelter in place by the governor on March 16th, quite a bit of hysteria and fear, and really some unknown. I remember sitting down for dinner each night and watching what was happening in Washington and thinking, okay, how long is it going to take before that gets here? Well, it took quite a while, really, for all of us to really feel that.
It
And
did.
then once it got here, then we watched the case counts, and they stayed, relatively low. So we tossed around. We always planned on live instruction on August 24th. So we want to stay as close to the normal day as possible because there are so many variables that come into play. You have transportation, you have scheduling, you have the total number of hours per day that you have to have in school. You can control what you know. It's very difficult to control what you don't know. So we kind of took that mindset, knowing that we had very low cases. We also just started discussing a remote learning package because we knew we were going to have students and staff both that had significant COVID issues. And so at the initial planning of it, it was very small, really. It wasn't very large. We didn't anticipate that we would have a lot of students because there weren't a lot of cases that were out there. And so we're paying attention to that. Okay, that changed in July. I think we went from roughly, 3, 4, 5 cases in March, April, May. June, we see it jump up to about 20. And what I'm talking about is the case count per week. That's what I watch with Mr. Felton from Yellowstone County, Riverstone Health. And then mid-July, it's at 220. And so that changed everything. And my email started to increase substantially, almost exponentially, requesting information regarding to what if I choose to have my child in a remote learning setting. The initial explanation was from my office was that students that were eligible for remote would be students who demonstrate health issues through our 504, which is a standard accommodation legal piece that we work with students who qualify for 504 accommodations. I also mentioned that students who would qualify through IDEA, our special needs. These are all documented type situations. And then I placed in there also unique circumstances, because what we're seeing, and I've taken several phone calls of people who are saying, my child is fine, but my grandmother lives with us and she's not, or my husband just had heart surgery and there's no way that we can even chance this coming into our home. And so I put it as unique circumstances, thinking probably that we would have a very small number. Well, as I stated, when July came, it just expanded hugely. And so I opened that remote learning up immediately, knowing that we were probably facing a large amount of numbers, and then put a survey out to our parents to get an idea of just how many students are we talking about. And that survey had 8,000 respondents, a little over 8,000, and it showed that about 31% of those students would be considering or very serious about remote learning. Well, when you take 30% of our total enrollment, which is 17,600, it's 5,000 students. So then the planning began. And so that's where we are now. We're offering a very robust remote package along with the live instruction package. And I'm not sleeping much at night because having to staff both sides of that, and we're starting that right now, is a challenge. It's not an impossibility, but it's a significant challenge.
Sure, absolutely. I do want to get back to students back into school and the special planning that goes with COVID and that kind of stuff. But I don't want to skip over also the levy that was passed this summer. So remind us quickly, just real quickly again, what the levy was, what it was all about, and then kind of if you could give us some of the things that now that you know that the levy has passed, here are the things that we'll be implementing because the levy was able to be passed.
Yeah, thank you. So the importance of the levy, just on face value, is that communities need to pass levies as they're presented by school districts. If not, then they fall further and further behind. I've shared that quite a few times, and we'll continue to. I brought up the concept that if Missoula and Bozeman and Helena pass levies each time a levy is runs or has run, and communities that don't pass them, the funding separates quite quickly, and the inability to keep pace is a factor in that. Not pointing the finger or blaming anyone; it's just the reality of it. So when I was made aware of the level of elementary deficit that I shared, the elementary levy became what I felt was the second most important component in our school district. Number one being safety and security, especially with the COVID issue. And so we actually went in and balanced our work to balance the budget. And I basically authorized about $4.3 million in reductions, significant amount of FTE, which is full-time employees, which are our people, in classified and certified and administrative. I cut 10% out of the operating budgets of each school and department across the district. We won't be able to hold on to that very long to get into that deficit. That being said, we still needed the levy, and the levy is 1.6 million to help support the budget. And it wasn't earmarked for anything specifically than operational costs. And I referred to it almost in an informal manner as to say, this is heat, lights, and people. This isn't for books and those types of things. This is just to turn the lights on. And,
one quick point I want you to make here is, can you give us a sense for what percentage of your budget is books and stuff like that, and what percentage is heat, light, and people? When you look at your budget, which one is the most that you spend the money on?
Prior to the reduction, the percent of the general fund budget, which is what operates the district, roughly 96.6% was in FTE, in people, and that's unhealthy. Not that we don't need the people, and the cause predominantly was the increased FTE and operational costs of the two new middle schools. They came in possibly a little more expensive than maybe the planners had anticipated, and then the revenues that are established by the state and then also by levies didn't come into fruition either, and so that's what created that. So it was a significant amount, but and I can't thank the community enough. I absolutely cannot thank them enough. I actually, prior, when we were in the middle of the COVID, had discussed with our trustees the possibility of removing the levy in response to the impact that it was having in our community across the state and across the nation. And our trustees said, no, Greg, I think we need to continue to run it and let the community decide on what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Along those lines, have you guys seen any, and this is probably for school districts across the state, but at Billings as well, any help from the state of Montana in additional funding for COVID stuff? And is that just for you guys to use how you want to use, or does it have to go to specific items in
I can say, Shoots, that we've been treated, I think, very well. The Office of Public Instruction, through the CARES Act, released right at $3 million for SD2, a little bit more than that, but we did have to distribute to the private schools that are within our district a certain percentage. Roughly, I think the final number was about 260,000. I got close. I'm approximating that.
Sure.
Remainder for us, we have until September of 2022 to use those funds, spend those funds. So we're looking at that. And then just as of in the last several weeks, the governor's office released an additional $7.3 million to SD2 in response to the COVID issue. That one's a little more tricky, though. That one has to be spent by December 30 of this year. That's creating some challenges for us. We have reached out to the governor's office and asked if we can extend that out, because we have two primary areas that we will expend those funds. I'll call area A is PP&E and safety equipment. That's masks, disinfectants, fogging machines, additional FTE, custodians for disinfecting, cleaning. Area A is all cleaning COVID related situations. Area B is support staff and instructional support staff. So the problem is if we hire teachers or support staff, custodians, with that 7 million, it only lasts until December. And so
Sure.
we're going to need them for the entire year. So we're doing some work with our budgets to be able to see what we can do with that. But very grateful for the governor's office and then also for the Office of Public Instruction. I think we've been treated very, very well. If we could extend the 7 million, it would help us immensely.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about going back to school. You guys spent the summer kind of running some scenarios and talking about that. Give us the guidelines. I know you've kind of touched on a lot of this stuff already, but give us the guidelines for going back to school and kind of what you guys have put in place as you see students coming through the door on the 24th.
Well, I would encourage people to go to our website, billingschools.org, and you can look at our reopening guide that I presented to the trustees about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, on Wednesday evening. It goes through and it lists all of the areas that we will be addressing. So first thing is I made a requirement with our district staff beginning in July that all employees return to work. We did a slow start. That doesn't mean the teachers, but it means, our office and support staff and administrators, that they begin to return to work and be back in work by the 1st of July. And then as we were in back at work, we started to see the cases rise. And so I implemented in the offices a mandatory face covering. And so we did that. Then as far as getting ready for the school year, I'd already touched on that we're offering a remote learning package that has really no boundaries around it for two reasons. One, we obviously wanted to accommodate those that have significant needs or those that have concerns or fears. But at the same time, what I wanted to do was relieve some of the enrollment in the live instruction to assist just with that. And so we felt very comfortable that if roughly 30% of our student population would be in remote, we're pretty comfortable with live instruction staying as close to the normal school day as possible. That's because we can control the variables. And frankly, it offers the best form of education. We did find that roughly 30% are close to that, completely disengaged when we were in remote learning. That's concerning. And then the remaining, other than a small percentage of students that it did excel, held their own, and we don't hold our own. We grow. So interestingly enough, the Newman reading program, when I asked Mr. Walsh, Principal Walsh, this summer, where are our students, do you think? And he said they're further behind than what I anticipated, which was really concerning.
Yeah.
So right now we currently have just a little less than 2,000 students that have registered for remote learning. We'll look to staff that with the remaining 15,000 in the regular day. We're looking at, I've used the term cohorting. I asked our principals before the end of the summer, before they left for the summer, to start planning on cohorting groups, meaning that if I'm in an elementary school, certain areas, classroom is considered a cohort group. If you're doing small group instruction, reading pods, let's try and keep the same individuals together so we have likeness, so that if there is a breakout, we can contact trace easier. As you get larger, it could be the Northwest wing could be a cohort. Let's see if we can, not interact as much as we can. I've used the term restrictive mode to come back when we're back in school, and we'll be in a restrictive mode where there will be no assemblies, no large gatherings, no open houses, anything that we can control just to be able to watch this unfold. On the live side, we are going to try to stay as close to a normal operating day as possible. Since the number of students are much less in remote, we are looking at some blocking scheduling in the middle schools and the high schools. We're just exploring that. We looked at it a long time ago too. Didn't think we were going to need it, but we're having discussions about that. If that's the case, it would just be less courses taught per day, but all students coming back. Interestingly enough, too, Shoots, we had explored what the term is a hybrid model, where students would come back for 2 days a week and then be home 3 days a week. what we decided was it wasn't conclusive enough to do that, that there's pros and cons to all of this. One of the cons to that would be that we have students home when parents are trying to work, and our teachers too. So teachers would be expected to work 5 days a week, but we could have students home 3 days a week. And there's some research out there that says that it's not conclusive enough to say that you're going to limit or eliminate any COVID mitigation. So we chose not to do that. It's a tough call, really. I mean, you saw Bozeman is going to do it. You saw some pushback from parents, and actually their trustees were split 5-3. So I think everyone is just really trying to do the best they can with what we have. And I've partnered with Dr. Neil Koo, the disease specialist from Billings Clinic, along with Mr. Felton in the development of the reopening guide. I'm a firm believer that you get the scientists involved so they can help us make good decisions. And so that's kind of where we are now. Live instruction will follow the school day as similar as possible. We are looking at blocking at this point in time, but I'm not going to say that we are going to do it, but we're looking seriously just because the number of remote learners is less than what we anticipated.
Sure. All right, let's talk about 3 different groups now, and I'm gonna eventually have you go through each of them. But so we'll talk about parents, we'll talk about students, and we'll talk about teachers and staff. I guess what are some of the main points that you want? What do you want parents to know about coming back to school?
Well, know that we've taken as much as we can into consideration. I'm sure that there's areas that we can improve on. Know that we're prepared to do the facial coverings. We're prepared to do the best we can with the safety. The point that I'll make for all groups of Shoots, I think, is the overarching component. And I actually had Dr. Neil Koo and Mr. John Felton address our all administrative meeting. And I asked a very important question that I felt from Dr. Koo. I said, Dr. Koo, how long do you think we're looking at before we approach any type of normalcy? And his response was, I really believe at a very minimum a year, probably 2 years before we can really maneuver in an area in a manner that we're not used to. I mean, that we're used to, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I shared on a couple of interviews that that we need to start thinking about that. That please don't think that Christmas it's over, or I think we're in this Shoots for a while. So for all 3 levels. So for the teachers, if that's what you're going to ask me next.
Well, and then with parents, let's stick real quick. Anything in particular that you need parents to do as we go back to school and as school starts?
Yeah, the number one thing parents need to do is make sure that your contact information is updated, and that if your child is sick, don't bring them to school.
Sure.
And if they become sick at school, we are going to call you immediately to come get them. Okay. And that's at the direction from the medical professionals. That's not something we can negotiate with. I'm asking parents to make sure that 1, your contact information is updated, and number 2, that you have childcare available to you as soon as possible in the case your child becomes sick.
Okay. All right. Now, on the student level, what do you want students to know? And we've talked a lot about that, but is there anything in particular that students need to know as they come back to school?
Well, I think just the 3 safety components, the making sure that their face coverings are adequate, making sure that they are physically distancing, and making sure that they're using appropriate hand hygiene. Now, we can't control what happens before 8 a.m. or after 3 p.m. So they have to, and I've said this to our entire community, Shoots, help us with this. Yeah. We know we're a stabilizing, normalizing component to a community. I just had shared that with our teachers this morning. Our community needs us to start and become normal so that it feels normal. But we can't do that if people aren't wearing face coverings, or if we're not physically distancing, or we're not just practicing good habits with the COVID. We need everyone's help, and especially our students, because it's hard to physically distance students in a school. We'll do our best, but then after school, if they're not practicing that, it's going to perpetuate the problem.
Sure. And how about faculty and staff? What do they need to know and to do as you guys head back to school?
Well, I think just keep communicating with us about areas of concern. what we need to do to help support them. We are ready to do whatever we need to do, take considerations, adjustments, whatever we need to do to make them feel safe, so that they are able to do their job to the best of their abilities. I think that's the most important thing, is that we've been able to pivot on a dime, and I'm getting used to that. Sometimes there's criticism for saying, why didn't you think of that? Well, sometimes you have to react to things that just happen immediately. And with that, so I think it's just in support of our staff.
All right. What kind of markers and benchmarks are you going to be looking back as school reopens? What kind of things are you paying attention to that that are going to mean we've successfully come back to school, or this just isn't working, we've got to come with a new game plan?
Yeah, good point. That's a good question, and it's one that we've talked about a lot. We are going to watch the viruses, and I'm in constant communication with Mr. Felton at Riverstone Health, and have been from the very beginning, along with Dr. Neil Koo. So they'll help guide us. They'll do the contact tracing if we experience a COVID virus in a school, or multiple COVIDs in our schools, and we'll take their lead. And again, I'm saying to our entire community, we really control our own destiny if we'll practice good COVID safety measures. And so we'll work hand in hand with the medical professionals in our community.
All right. Anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to get out there, that you want people to know about school reopening?
Yeah, I just if you have questions, please, and people are doing that, so I appreciate that. Check out the billingschools.org website. There's an FAQ, frequently asked questions. There's a reopening guide. There's a registration process for the COVID remote plan. We asked all people to at least fill it out, so we knew how many were going to be in live and how many were going to be in remote, so it's clear. So I encourage people to look at that. The deadline for the registration for the remote is this Friday, August 14th, at the end of the day, 5 p.m. We've already started the staffing and those types of things, the conversations about that. So if you're thinking about it, please make sure it's completed. We've seen quite a decline in the requests now. We've had roughly a little over 11,000 respondents, so I feel really good about that. So yeah.
Are you using that 11,000 kind of as your percentage? I know it's not the full 17, so kind of breaking down along those percentage lines that way.
Yeah, if we remember our old statistics class, right? There's only a certain number that you need to give you a statistical significant number. Yeah, we are. I feel very good that 11,000 is indicative. I anticipate we may climb as high as 2,500, which really is about half of what showed interest initially. So I'm holding my breath a little bit, but I think we're pretty close.
Okay, good deal. Well, Superintendent Upham, thank you so much for taking the time to come and visit with us. I know it's been a busy summer, and I know you and your staff have had an incredible lift over the course of the summer to get us where we are today, with school just around the corner and opening. And I know that safety is the most important priority, but I'm sure it has been a pretty long summer. So thank you so much to you and your staff for getting us where we are today. I know it's been an incredible lift.
Appreciate that, Shoots. We have a great team, so thank you for recognizing them.
All right.